Here is why programming still matters. Some people today are discouraging others from learning programming on the grounds of AI will automate it. This advice will be seen as some of the worst career advice ever given. This is Andrew Negg. You can see his credentials here. This guy is, in my opinion and in my research, one of the best voices on AI. He's typically a step ahead of everyone else, and he's been in the field for a long time. This is a no hype kind of guy. I disagree with the Turing Award and Nobel Prize winner who wrote, "It is far more likely that the programming occupation will be extinct than it will become all-powerful. More and more computers will program themselves." Statements discouraging people from learning to code are harmful. And I have to admit, I myself in the channel started to become a little bit of a doomer there for a second because of all the layoffs that have occurred in the past year. But despite that, when you look at the technicals of development, of software development, and even with the introduction of AI, I can see from a logical standpoint that the use of programming and the utility of learning how to program is still evident and it's still there. And I didn't just want to make the argument from, hey, this is just Fido saying it. I wanted you to read it from someone else who can be considered and is by many considered an expert in the field. In the 1960s, when programming moved from punch cards where a programmer had to laboriously make holes in physical cards to write code character by character, to keyboards with terminals, programming became easier. And that made it a better time than before to begin programming. Yet it was in the era that the Nobel laureate Herb Simon wrote the words quoted in the first paragraph. Today, arguments not to learn to code continue to echo this comment. So the original comment, the one that he read, talking about, hey, look, programming is going to be irrelevant, that was from the 1960s. And anybody who's been alive since then can evidently say that programming in our lifetime exploded. And you could say that it also had its ups and downs, but nonetheless, what we do today on the internet, on our devices, how we do our finances, how we do our healthcare, how we pay our bills, all of that infrastructure, all of those systems were built by programmers. So this Simon guy was off. As coding becomes easier, more people should code, not fewer. Over the past few decades, as programming has moved from assembly language to higher languages like C, from desktop to cloud, from raw text editors to IDEs to AI-assisted coding, where sometimes one barely even looks at the generated code, which some coders recently started to call vibe coding, it is getting easier with each step. I wrote previously that I see tech-savvy people coordinating AI tools to move toward being 10x professionals, individuals who have 10 times the impact of the average person in their field. I'm increasingly convinced that the best way for many people to accomplish this is not to be just consumers of AI applications, but to learn enough code to use AI-assisted coding tools effectively. And this goes to the argument that I've said in previous videos where the most powerful person with AI coding tools is going to be a software engineer. And you can make very complicated arguments as to why that is the case, but I'll make a very simple one. When it comes down to whether you're doing that on a line-by-line basis with Copilot or you're doing it on a mass basis, on a mass code generation basis with something like Cursor, eventually you'll run into a bug that the AI will struggle to fix, right? And what happens is that if you do not have the coding competency to be able to handle that bug yourself, you're definitely going to ask an engineer to go and fix it for you if it matters that much, right? Or you're going to get forced into the situation where you know so little that you have to start learning some code in order to be able to solve that specific bug, right? When I was working on the Coursera generative AI for everyone and needed to generate AI artwork for the background images, I worked with a collaborator who had studied art history and knew the language of art. He prompted Midjourney with terminology based on the historical style, palette, artist, inspiration, and so on, using the language of art to get the result he wanted. I didn't even know this language, and my paltry attempts at prompting could never deliver as effective a result. When you understand programming fundamentals, you have a better comprehension of code design, of the mental patterns that you want, the logical patterns that you want to execute in order to get the thing to do the thing that you want it to do, right? And somebody who does not have that talent will not be able to, as Aang says, comparing it to the artist, you won't be able to get the type of fidelity that you need in your prompt to get close to the result that you want. Similarly, scientists, analysts, marketers, recruiters, and people of wide range of professions who understand the language of software through their knowledge of coding can tell an LLM or an AI-enabled IDE what they want much more precisely and get much better results. As these tools are continuing to make coding easier, this is the best time yet to learn to code, to learn the language of software, and to learn to make computers do exactly what you want them to do. His base argument effectively is being able to learn to code makes you a better driver. Ultimately, if you want to maximize tool usage and you want to have the maximum amount of power when it comes to using these tools, it's important to learn to code. It's important to program, at least in the way that these tools exist today. Okay, so if learning to program still matters, one of the questions then become, what programming language should you learn? And I think that me answering this question here in this video is kind of dumb. I don't think that that's a good question for me to answer. There would have been a time in my career where I would have been very quick to jump onto a specific thing or a specific language, but I don't know your specific circumstance. So that's why I can't answer that question in detail. But what I can say that the bare minimum of what you should learn insofar as it comes to programming are programming fundamentals, learning the core principles of sound software development. And those principles, you could take them around and you'll generally be able to apply them to any programming language that you encounter. Now, what I will also say is that the amount of things that you can learn is so wide that it may confuse people. It may stress them out because there's just too many options. And to that, I would say just learn as you go. Instead of trying to learn programming like you would an academic, I would instead get in the mind of a hacker, which is just to learn enough programming so that you have the fundamentals underneath your belt, and then get an idea of what it is that you want to build, and then just commit to building it, right? And once you do that and you follow through on that process, essentially what will happen is that you will start building, you run into a really big problem, you have to learn your way out of that problem, boom, and then you move on, right, to the next thing. And then that process repeats itself. And by the time you end up deploying your application or the software that you built, all of those lessons along the way have been collectivized and inserted in to your brain, and then that then raises your technical foundation. If I could do this all over again insofar as learning to program, learning to code, and being a software engineer, I would focus so much more on getting straight to building than I would focus on trying to exhaustively learn different programming languages. Because look, you'll spend multiple hours, weeks, maybe even months learning a programming language that you'll never use in practice. The better way to do it is to actually think about what it is that you're going to build, and more at a level higher is what problem are you trying to solve, and then reverse engineer effectively the tools that you'll need to be able to achieve the solution to that specific problem. If you are a software engineer or a tech professional that is struggling in the job market, or you're looking to transition from one job to another, please book a consultation with me. I have a link in the description box below. I recently got one of my students hired, and I got another one a pay raise. Other than that, if you are a DIY guy or you don't have the coin to spend, but you are working very hard to crack this job market, I recommend that you watch this video right here, and I will show you all the strategies that I teach my students for free. Thank you so much for watching, and I will see you on the next one. Bye-bye.